Inside a factory floor, an automated molding machine sits mid-cycle. Then, without warning, the system restarts and motion resumes inside the operating zone. Inside an industrial workshop, wooden planks are stacked into a tall, uneven pile. Then, without warning, the entire structure tips and collapses all at once. In a busy container yard, a large reach stacker swings wide while turning, its rear counterweight sweeping outward faster than the machine's visible path suggests. On a narrow dock walkway beside a vessel, a mooring line suddenly tightens, and the space turns into a snapback zone in an instant. On a factory floor, a sealed halogen oven suddenly opens under pressure, releasing a rapid discharge of heated liquid and expanding steam. Never, ever open or stand directly in front of a pressurized vessel without confirming full pressure release and safe conditions. On an airport apron, as aircraft stairs are being pulled away, a crew member steps down without looking, leaving a gap where access was just moments before and turning a routine step into an immediate fall hazard. Never, ever assume access equipment is still in place. Always visually confirm your footing and ensure stairs or platforms are secured before stepping. Also, avoid disconnecting or repositioning access equipment while it is still in use. On a roadside transport, a large elevated load sits beneath overhead power lines, where even a small change in clearance turns the space into an electrical hazard zone. Do not touch or reach toward live electrical lines. Always maintain safe distance and treat them as energized. Inside a toll booth, everything looks routine until a sudden roadway failure sends high force toward the enclosure, pushing energy through the glass in an instant. Don't always assume that enclosed spaces like booths or cabins are fully protected. Always recognize exposure to external hazards, especially high-energy failures like tire bursts, and ensure barriers, positioning, and protective materials are designed to withstand sudden impact forces. At a rail handling platform, a worker pulls on long steel rails stacked over a gap. Then a small shift in position removes support and the surface gives way without warning. Never, ever pull or handle heavy materials while standing on unstable surfaces or over open gaps. Secure your footing first. On a narrow rail path above a drop, a man bends down to lift a loose metal rail right at the edge of a broken concrete span. Then the unstable surface shifts under applied force. Never, ever work on unstable or unsupported edges without securing the ground and establishing a safe standing position. If the ground isn't stable, neither are you. Secure the surface before you apply force. Beside a canal, an excavator operates near the edge. Then the bucket suddenly releases and drops downward within the machine's working range. Maintain the excavator exclusion zone and never walk under a raised bucket. Treat the machine's operating envelope as active whenever the boom is elevated. A steel coil hangs from a forklift in an open yard. Then, without warning, the load loses support and drops free from the forks. Never, ever use a forklift as a crane for suspended loads. Forklifts are not designed to safely control hanging weight, and doing so removes stability, precision, and load security, turning even a routine lift into an unpredictable swinging hazard that can shift, drop, or rotate without control. In a tight roadside lane, a parked container creates a narrow space just as a truck begins reversing into the blind zone behind it. Do not use phones or distractions near moving vehicles. Stay alert and maintain clear awareness in active traffic zones. Inside a pizzeria kitchen, a pressure cooker sits sealed and heated. Seconds later, built-up pressure suddenly releases into the surrounding air. Do not operate pressure cookers without strict control of pressure release systems. When steam and internal pressure are not properly managed, energy builds rapidly inside the vessel, and any failure or premature opening can trigger a sudden, forceful release of contents and pressure. On a quiet roadside at night, a large tire suddenly releases its built-up pressure in a violent burst of air and debris. Always treat large tires, especially truck or heavy equipment tires, as pressurized hazards. Use proper inflation procedures and keep a safe distance during servicing. On a quiet roadside at night, a dump truck sits idle while two people rest beside it. Then, without warning, the vehicle begins to move, while a blind spot remains occupied within the surrounding zone. Do not move any vehicle without confirming the surrounding area is completely clear. Before engaging a truck, operators must perform a full 360-degree check around and beneath the vehicle, because blind spots and assumptions about others' positions can instantly turn a stationary environment into a high-risk situation. Inside a construction site, an excavator is lifted out of a deep pit suspended mid-air when the load begins to shift off balance. Ensure lifting plans account for load stability, secure rigging, and controlled balance before hoisting heavy equipment over voids. In a tight loading yard between two parked cargo trucks, a worker leans his full body weight against the front of a heavy vehicle, trying to push against it, but it doesn't respond the way he expects. Do not rely on body force to control or stop large vehicles. Always assume heavy trucks can move suddenly or shift without warning, and maintain a sub-buffer zone instead of placing yourself directly between solid surfaces where escape space is limited. Inside a cluttered workshop, a large wooden piece spins on a lathe. When it suddenly comes loose and moves outward from the rotation, secure workpieces properly and always stand out of the direct line of rotation when operating a lathe. Inside a factory line of heavy stamping presses, a worker carries out his duties in the machine's working zone, right where the metal and force meet, just as the equipment cycles again. Do not enter or reach into the operating zone of a powered press unless the machine is fully isolated, locked out, and verified safe, because these systems can cycle automatically or unexpectedly, leaving no time to react or withdraw. Industrial presses convert stored mechanical or hydraulic energy into extremely high force, delivered in a fixed vertical path. Their cycle time is fast and repeatable, meaning once triggered by automation, sensors, or residual energy, the ram will complete its full stroke regardless of obstructions. Because the motion is guided and constrained, there is no deviation or slowdown, and anything within that path is subjected to the full force instantly. Machines don't hesitate. Control the energy before you get close. In a narrow construction yard, a truck reverses along a boundary wall while a worker stands just beside it when the available space suddenly begins to close. Maintain safe clearance from reversing vehicles and never stand between a moving vehicle and a fixed structure. Always stay visible and outside compression zones. When a heavy vehicle reverses in confined space, even slight lateral movement can transfer force into nearby structures. If the structure is weakened or unstable, the impact can displace it, collapsing it into the adjacent space while the vehicle continues its motion. Moving mass and fixed structures create invisible danger zones. If space is closing, you need to be moving away, not standing still. At a roadside service area in Lipetsk, a worker leans over a large truck tire while adjusting it, when it suddenly releases built-up pressure in a rapid burst of air and debris. Treat all heavy-duty tires as high-energy pressure systems. Use protective positioning, proper tools, and safety cages when servicing or inflating. Along a narrow path lined with palm trees, a man walks forward carrying a long metal rod raised high, entering the energized zone of overhead power lines. Maintain safe clearance from overhead electrical lines and control the height and orientation of conductive materials during transport. Overhead power lines carry high voltage that can energize nearby conductive objects through direct contact or electrical arcing. When a long metal rod enters this energized zone, it becomes a pathway for current, allowing electricity to travel instantly along its length and into whatever is in contact with it. Height and reach can turn tools into hazards. If it can touch the line, it can carry the danger. Outside a residential building, a worker applies plaster high on the wall near an exposed edge when the supporting surface suddenly gives way. Use stable platforms, proper scaffolding, and fall protection when working at height. Never rely on unstable footing or improvised support. Inside a busy tire workshop, multiple large off-road tires are laid out across the floor. When one pressurized tire suddenly releases its stored energy in a rapid outward burst. Follow controlled tire servicing procedures. Use inflation cages, remote airlines, and maintain a safe standoff distance. Never position yourself directly over or beside a pressurized tire during handling heavy equipment. Tires operate under high internal pressure and act like compressed energy vessels. If the bead is not properly seated, the rim is misaligned, or structural integrity is compromised, the stored energy can release instantly, producing a rapid pressure release and outward expansion that displaces anything nearby. A tire isn't just rubber, it's compressed energy waiting to release. Control the process, keep your distance, and respect the pressure every time. On an open industrial roadside, a forklift moves along the edge of the lane and begins a turn. Then the machine tips and rolls as its balance shifts beyond the stability limit. Operate forklifts with strict attention to speed, turning radius, surface conditions, and load position. Keep the center of gravity low, stay within the machine's stability triangle, and use the seat restraint so the operator remains protected inside the safety zone. On a construction site beside active power lines, a boom lift rises higher and higher until the space between the metal and wire suddenly turns into a path for energy. Do not operate elevated equipment near overhead power lines. Always maintain minimum clearance distances and treat every line as energized to prevent unintended electrical contact or arc. In a busy container yard, a heavy reach stacker begins to move between stacked containers, while a forward blind zone conceals a critical obstruction within its path. Do not enter or remain in. Equipment blind spots. Always establish clear exclusion zones and confirm visibility or communication before any heavy vehicle moves. Large container handling equipment like reach stackers have extensive forward blind zones due to their elevated cab, long chassis, and load handling structure. Objects or close to the front can fall completely outside the operator's line of sight, especially at ground level. When the machine begins to move, its mass and momentum create a continuous forward force, and without visual feedback or detection systems, the operator has no immediate input to stop or adjust. The size and weight of the equipment means stopping distance is not instantaneous, especially at low visibility angles. If the operator can't detect it, it's outside the machine's awareness. Maintain separation and stay within visible zones at all times. On a clear airport apron, a parked aircraft sits still with safety markings on the ground. Yet a service vehicle drives straight into the wing's silent boundary. Do not enter marked aircraft safety zones. Always stop, assess clearance, and follow ground markings before moving equipment near parked aircraft. On a roadside collection stop, a worker tosses a bag into a garbage truck. Then, in an instant, the compactor zone reacts as internal pressure builds unexpectedly. Never assume waste is safe to compress. Do not load sealed or unknown contents into compaction equipment without inspection. Garbage trucks use hydraulic compactors that generate extremely high compressive force to reduce waste volume. When a sealed or pressurized item is introduced, the compaction process increases internal pressure beyond the container's limits. This rapid pressure rise can cause the container to fail suddenly, releasing stored energy as expanding gas or material displacement. Compression multiplies hidden risks. Unknown waste should never be forced under pressure. A loaded truck rolls onto a narrow river barge. Then the entire platform begins to tilt under shifting weight. Never drive heavy vehicles onto a floating platform without confirming load distribution and stability limits. A water pump hums on a wet concrete floor. Then one small contact turns the entire setup into an energized electrical zone. Never use electrical equipment on wet surfaces without proper insulation, grounding, and protection. Water significantly reduces electrical resistance, allowing current to travel easily across surfaces and through conductive paths. When exposed wiring or equipment interacts with moisture, electricity can escape its intended circuit and energize nearby surfaces, creating an unintended path to ground. Electricity always follows the easiest path. Wet environments make everything part of the circuit. A suspended load hangs over a snowy work zone. Then the rigging suddenly fails, sending the load accelerating downward and outward along its path. Never stand within the fall or swing zone of a suspended load, and always wear proper head protection. Inside a textile facility, a worker steps onto the edge of a running machine to adjust material when the rotating rollers suddenly draw everything inward toward the pinch point. Keep clear of moving rollers and conveyors during operation. Isolate and lock out machinery before attempting adjustments or interventions. Textile machines use rotating rollers and feed systems that create continuous pinch points. These rollers generate strong pulling forces designed to draw fabric through and anything entering that zone. Loose material, fabric, or any item entering that zone can be rapidly pulled in due to friction and rotational momentum. If it's moving, it's pulling. Shut it down before you reach in. On an offshore rig floor, heavy equipment operates beneath suspended loads. When a component suddenly drops into the work zone, always secure overhead loads, verify rigging integrity, and establish exclusion zones beneath suspended equipment. No one should stand under a lifted load. Suspended loads rely entirely on rigging systems, chains, slings, hooks, and connection points to remain stable. If any component fails or becomes improperly secured, gravity takes immediate control, accelerating the load downward with increasing force, leaving no time for reaction. What's above you matters as much as what's around you. If it's not secured, it's already a falling hazard. Inside an industrial workshop, a pressurized machine assembly runs through connected piping when the system suddenly releases its built-up pressure in a rapid burst. Do not stand on or over pressurized systems during operation. Isolate, depressurize, and verify zero energy before approaching or working on equipment. On a residential terrace in Subhash Nagar, a man tosses debris over the edge during cleaning, entering the space of a nearby low-tension power line running close to the wall. Maintain safe clearance from all electrical lines around buildings and treat every exposed wire as energized. Avoid working, reaching, or disposing materials near live lines. Low-tension, LT lines still carry enough voltage to energize objects and surfaces upon contact. When a tool or thrown material enters this energized zone, electricity can travel instantly through the nearest conductive path, especially in outdoor environments where moisture and debris increase conductivity. Danger doesn't always look like high voltage. It can be right next to you. If a line is within reach, it's already a hazard. At a dimly lit construction site, a narrow galvanized steel surface sits beside an open wastewater pit. When the edge suddenly gives way under load, never step onto unsecured, narrow, or potentially slippery metal surfaces near open pits. Always use designated walkways, guardrails, and fall protection when working at elevation or around openings. In a cluttered industrial yard, a worker stands elevated on a metal drum while cutting overhead. Sparks fall onto a sealed metal drum beneath overhead cutting, while unstable pressure builds inside. Never stand on containers or drums as work platforms, especially when performing hot work above them. Always verify contents, ensure proper venting, and use approved stable access equipment. Residual vapors inside enclosed drums can form highly combustible mixtures. Even a small spark introduces enough energy to trigger rapid combustion and pressure buildup. The confined space amplifies this reaction, causing a sudden rupture or explosion. A drum is never empty until proven safe and ventilated. Elevate safely. Never gamble with hidden pressure below your feet. Beside a parked pickup, a man stands on a small stool to load long timbers when a subtle shift causes the support to suddenly give way. Never use makeshift supports like stools or unstable objects for elevated work. Always use proper ladders or secured platforms designed to handle load and balance. Outside a motorcycle service bay, roadside traffic moves past the work zone when a fast-moving bike suddenly loses control and slides sideways into the area. Do maintain safe positioning away from roadside activity zones and avoid working directly exposed to passing traffic without barriers. At speed, a motorcycle's balance depends on traction and steering stability. Once that is lost, inertia carries both the machine forward uncontrollably. The collision redirects that momentum laterally, projecting everything into nearby surroundings. Road hazards don't stop at the road. Create distance or risk entering the hazard zone. Inside a busy auto workshop, A car sits lifted while a worker operates tools beneath. Unseen heat and sparks begin building inside the vehicle, quietly turning the space into a hazard zone. Do continuously monitor for heat, sparks, and ignition risks when working near enclosed vehicle interiors, especially during cutting or welding tasks. In a warehouse aisle packed with shelves and loose boxes, loaded carts move through tight space, while an open elevator shaft sits exposed behind the path of travel. Enforce strict control of all floor openings by installing physical barriers, locked gates, or secured covers before any work begins in the area. Workers must maintain constant positional awareness when moving loads, especially when walking backward, and workflows should be designed to eliminate blind movement wherever hazards like shafts, pits, or drop-offs exist. Human balance depends heavily on forward visual input and spatial awareness. When moving backward, the brain loses real-time depth cues and hazard detection. Once the trailing foot crosses an unsupported edge, the body's center of mass shifts beyond the base of support, triggering an immediate loss of equilibrium. With no solid surface to counteract gravity, unsupported mass accelerates downward, leaving no time for corrective movement or recovery. What you can't see can still control your path. Secure the opening before anyone moves near it. At a roadside fuel station, a small vehicle is being refueled when fuel vapors suddenly ignite at the pump area, rapidly spreading across the space. Do strictly control all ignition sources, eliminate static buildup, and maintain a clear exclusion zone around fueling operations. Proper grounding, safe handling procedures, and limiting unnecessary personnel near fuel transfer points are critical to prevent vapor ignition in confined or open environments. Fuel vapors evaporate rapidly and disperse into the surrounding air, forming a highly flammable mixture within a specific concentration range. These vapors are often invisible and can travel beyond the immediate fueling point. When a spark, whether from static electricity, metal contact, or equipment, is introduced, it ignites the vapor cloud instantly, causing rapid combustion and pressure expansion that propagates outward in a flash event. The danger isn't the liquid, it's the invisible vapor. Control the environment before it ignites. On an active roadway, a marked work zone sits within flowing traffic when a fast-moving vehicle fails to slow and enters the zone at speed. Establish layered traffic control systems, including advance warning signs, speed reduction measures, physical buffers, and designated safe zones to separate workers from moving vehicles. Workers should never rely solely on driver compliance and must always position themselves with an escape path and maximum visibility. On a construction site, a worker climbs onto a tractor arm to move a hanging cable, then sudden sparks erupt as the metal makes contact. Treat all overhead lines as live at all times, maintain minimum approach distances, and use only insulated tools and approved methods for repositioning or working near electrical conductors. Equipment should never be used as a contact point for unknown or energized lines. Electrical systems maintain high voltage potential, and when a conductive object like machinery enters that field, it provides a low resistance path for current flow. Once contact or close proximity occurs, electricity can arc through the air, ionizing it and creating a conductive bridge. This results in a rapid discharge of energy through the equipment structure, producing intense heat, light, and explosive sparks. You don't have to touch electricity to trigger it. Distance is the first line of defense. A long bamboo stick extends upward near a home entrance. Then it reaches too close to overhead lines, turning a simple task into a hidden electrical hazard. Never lift long objects, conductive or not, near overhead power lines. Always maintain safe clearance. Even though bamboo is normally less conductive, moisture, dirt, and internal water content can significantly lower its resistance. When brought close to high-voltage lines, the electric field can cause current to bridge the gap or travel along the surface of the bamboo, especially if it's damp, creating a continuous path toward ground. Non-conductive doesn't mean safe near power lines. Distance, not material, is what protects you. On a rural roadside, a bulldozer moves down from a trailer ramp. Then, as its weight shifts, the entire setup loses balance. Never, ever attempt to unload heavy tracked equipment from a trailer that is not fully stabilized, level, and supported on solid ground. Do not rely on visual balance alone. Verify ground-bearing capacity, secure the trailer against movement, and ensure ramps are properly aligned and rated for the full machine load. Inside a workshop, a worker straddles a stepladder to reach the back of a van, until a small shift in balance turns the ladder into a tipping point. Never, ever straddle a ladder or work outside its side rails to gain extra reach. Do keep your body centered between the rails and reposition the ladder instead of overreaching. Stability depends on alignment, not convenience. Inside a narrow hallway, a worker reaches toward an exposed electrical connection. Then, in an instant, the air ionizes and a high-energy arc forms across the gap. Desist from touching or manipulating exposed wiring or connections without isolating the power source first. Do de-energize circuits and verify zero voltage before any contact. Electricity doesn't give second chances. On a smoke-filled second floor, a ladder becomes the only exit for two firefighters. Then, in a single moment, its stability fails under load. Never, ever trust a ladder placement that hasn't been secured and angle-checked under load. Do ensure ladders are properly footed, tied off, and positioned at a safe angle before committing your full weight, especially during emergency egress. On a roadside shoulder, a forklift tries to place a car into a truck bed. Then the entire lift becomes unstable in seconds and starts tipping before the placement is complete. Always use equipment specifically designed for vehicle lifting and loading, with proper attachment points and load control. Don't lift oversized or unbalanced loads on standard forks, especially at height or extended reach. Inside a small shop counter area, a lighter is being lit in a confined space. Then, in an instant, accumulated vapors ignite and release energy through the air. Do keep ignition sources away from enclosed spaces where vapors, gases, or flammable residues may be present. Don't use open flames near counters, storage areas, or confined indoor environments without confirming the air is clear of flammable buildup. Lighters release a small but concentrated fuel source, typically butane, which can accumulate in low or poorly ventilated areas because it is heavier than air. When this vapor mixes with oxygen within a certain concentration range, it forms a flammable mixture that can ignite instantly when exposed to a spark. The ignition causes rapid combustion, expanding gases and producing a brief but intense pressure and heat wave in the immediate area. Invisible vapors can ignite faster than you react. If the air isn't clear, a single spark is enough. Inside a deep excavation trench, a cutting torch meets an old pipeline. Then, in an instant, trapped gases ignite and release energy upward from the ground. Treat all pipelines as potentially pressurized or containing flammable residues before any cutting or grinding begins. Don't introduce sparks, heat, or open flame until the line is fully isolated, purged, and verified gas-free. A street food stall looks normal until a single point of contact turns the entire metal setup into an energized hazard. Do keep electrical wiring sealed, grounded, and protected, especially around metal surfaces and wet areas. Don't operate equipment with exposed wires or unstable power connections in environments where water and metal are present. Electricity always tries to travel through the easiest path to the ground. If wiring is damaged or poorly connected, power can leak out and spread into nearby metal objects like tables, frames, or equipment. Instead of staying inside the wires, the energy moves into anything conductive. In environments with water, metal surfaces, and damp ground, electricity can spread beyond its intended path. When conductive surfaces become energized, current follows available paths to ground through connected materials. Electricity follows the easiest path. Make sure that path is never through your workspace. A delivery van rolls forward quietly while someone stands just feet away from it. Always stay alert and maintain distance when vehicles are running or positioned on slopes or driveways. Don't assume you can stop a moving vehicle with body strength. At a bridge removal site, an excavator extends its arm over unstable ground. Then the entire surface suddenly gives way. Ensure to assess ground stability and load-bearing capacity before positioning. Heavy equipment near edges. Don't operate machinery on unsupported or eroded soil without proper reinforcement. Excavators exert significant ground pressure through their tracks, especially when the arm extends outward. This shifts the machine's center of gravity forward, concentrating force at the edge. If the soil or structure beneath cannot support that load, it begins to fail. Near water, soil is often weakened by saturation and erosion. The ground may appear solid on the surface but lacks internal cohesion. Edges hide weaknesses you can't see. Always verify the ground before you trust it. On a public roadway, a forklift rolls forward with its forks extended into traffic, just as a fast-moving vehicle enters the same path. Never, ever move forklifts into active traffic lanes without full visibility and traffic control. Always isolate the work zone. A forklift lifts a tall stack of glass bottles, then a subtle shift at the top turns into a cascading collapse. Always stop immediately when a load begins to shift or lose stability. Don't continue lifting or adjusting a load once its balance is compromised. Tall loads raise the center of gravity, making them highly sensitive to small movements. When the forklift lifts unevenly or the load isn't perfectly secured, even a slight tilt creates a lateral force that begins to pull the stack off balance. As the top layer shifts, gravity amplifies the movement. The weight transfers unevenly through the stack, causing a chain reaction where each layer loses support. Small shifts become big failures fast. The moment a load moves, stop, reassess, reset. A vehicle rolls toward a closed barrier gate. Then the rigid arm suddenly releases and swings rapidly under stored tension. Do approach barrier gates slowly and ensure full clearance before moving forward. Don't drive into or force a gate arm that is still in the closed position. A worker opens an electrical cabinet in a confined room. Seconds later, stored energy releases in a rapid arc event that fills the space instantly. Never, ever enter or work inside energized electrical panels without proper isolation and verification. Electrical cabinets can contain high voltage energy, even when they appear inactive. A fault, like a short circuit or accidental contact, can release energy instantly as an arc flash, generating extreme heat and expanding air pressure. In enclosed spaces, this energy has limited dissipation. The result is a rapid energy release and pressure surge, turning a small fault into a full-space arc event within milliseconds. Electricity doesn't warn. You control it or it controls the system. Isolate, verify, and never assume a system is safe. Don't forget to share what you learned today in the comments. Your insights could save a life. Take care. In a residential courtyard, a raised work platform suddenly destabilizes mid-task. Then the entire structure collapses to the ground in seconds. Ensure all lifting platforms are positioned on level, load-bearing surfaces, properly stabilized, and continuously monitored for shifting conditions. Outriggers, locking systems, and weight limits must be verified before elevation, and no operation should proceed if ground integrity is uncertain. On a rain-soaked street beside a concrete wall, a worker climbs a metal ladder, leaning against an electrical pole. Then a sudden arc flashes, and sparks explode outward in every direction. Do fully isolate electrical sources, verify de-energization, and use insulated ladders and protective equipment when working near power lines, especially in wet conditions where conductivity is significantly increased. Water reduces electrical resistance across surfaces, allowing current to travel more easily through metal structures, tools, and even the ground. When a conductive object enters the electrical field of a live line, voltage can jump across gaps by ionizing the surrounding air, creating an arc flash. This releases a concentrated burst of thermal and electrical energy, dispersing sparks and heat in all directions. Rain turns conductors into pathways. Control the current before you climb. On an upper factory level, workers guide a large piece of equipment toward the edge for loading, while one remains standing on it. Then the entire load suddenly slips and drops to the ground floor. Keep all personnel off loads being lifted or moved, and secure equipment with proper restraints before any transfer. When heavy equipment is positioned near an edge without proper anchoring, its center of gravity can shift beyond support limits. Once that tipping point is crossed, gravity takes over instantly, causing an uncontrolled speed with accelerating force.